Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Please consider subscribing and check out our Patreon for more. Enjoy the video. It's a big day, huh? The therapist, Dr. Lewis, leaned forward in her chair, her eyes warm and encouraging. Yeah, Hank responded, his voice laced with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. He sat upright, his hands clasped tightly in his lap, as if ready to embrace whatever this new chapter of his life might bring. I guess it is. You don't have to be nervous, Hank. This is a safe space. I want you to feel comfortable sharing your thoughts and feelings without judgment. Dr. Lewis offered a gentle smile, her voice calm and reassuring. Hank nodded, his gaze shifting briefly to the floor before meeting the therapist's eyes again. I know, this is a big step. I mean, I'm 60 years old and I'm just now figuring this out. It's a lot to process. It's absolutely a significant realization, and it's completely natural to have a range of emotions about it. Dr. Lewis paused, giving Hank a moment to collect his thoughts. Why don't you tell me a little about what brought you here today? What made you decide to seek therapy? Hank took a deep breath, steadying himself. Well, it's been a long journey, I guess. I always felt different, even as a kid. I never quite fit in with the other boys. I mean, I tried. I played sports, I pretended to be interested in cars and girls, but it all felt so forced, like I was playing a role that wasn't meant for me. That must have been difficult, feeling like you had to pretend to be someone you're not. Dr. Lewis prompted, her tone empathetic. It was... Hank's voice trailed off for a moment as he recalled the struggles of his youth. I just thought everyone felt that way, that everyone was faking it to some extent. But as I got older, I started to realize that something was truly different about me. I'd steal glances at my sister's dresses, secretly hoping to try one on. I'd daydream about being a girl, imagining what it would feel like to wake up in a girl's body. And how did those thoughts and feelings make you feel? Dr. Lewis leaned forward, her eyes intent on Hank's, hanging on his every word. Scared, mostly, Hank admitted, his voice cracking slightly. I mean, this was the 60s and 70s. Being gay was barely acceptable, and being transgender, people didn't even talk about that. I felt so confused and alone. I thought something was wrong with me, that I was broken somehow. Dr. Lewis nodded, her expression compassionate. It must have been an incredibly isolating experience, especially during that time period. Society wasn't as accepting or understanding of gender diversity as it is now. Yeah, Hank agreed, a slight frown crossing his face as he remembered the loneliness of those years. I just bottled it all up. I threw myself into my studies, buried myself in books, and tried to ignore those feelings. I told myself it was just a phase, something I'd grow out of. But those feelings never truly went away, did they? Dr. Lewis asked gently. No. Hank shook his head slowly. They'd lie dormant for a while, but they always resurfaced. Every time I thought I had them under control, they'd find a way to rear their head again, like a persistent weed that refuses to be uprooted. And how did you cope with that? Hank gave a wry chuckle. Denial, mostly. I pushed it all down, deeper and deeper, until I convinced myself it wasn't real. I went to college, got married, started a career. I did everything by the book. I thought if I checked all the right boxes, those feelings would disappear. Dr. Lewis raised an eyebrow, inviting him to continue. But they didn't. Hank continued, his voice heavy with resigned acceptance. They'd lurk in the shadows, waiting for me to let my guard down. And every time they resurfaced, it was like a storm raging inside me. I'd question everything, my marriage, my identity, my entire life. But then the storm would pass, and I'd go back to denying it all, pretending everything was fine. What made you finally decide to confront these feelings head on? Dr. Lewis asked, her voice soft and inviting. Hank sighed, running a hand through his silver hair. I turned 60 this year. 60. It's supposed to be this milestone, right? A time to reflect on your life, your accomplishments. But when I looked back, I felt unfulfilled, like I'd spent my entire life living a lie, hiding the true me, denying her existence. Dr. Lewis nodded, her eyes understanding. "And that's when you decided to explore these feelings and seek therapy?" "Yes," Hank nodded, his voice resolute. "I realized that I owed it to myself to finally be honest, to accept and embrace who I truly am. I'm tired of running from myself, Dr. Lewis. I want to be free." "And that's an incredibly brave decision, Hank." Dr. Lewis offered a warm smile. "Many people never have the courage to confront their true selves, to take that leap of faith and embrace their authenticity. You should be proud of yourself for taking this step." "Thank you, Doctor," Hank said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm terrified, but also excited. It's like I'm finally allowing myself to dream, to imagine a future where I'm truly happy and whole." "Well, I'm here to support you every step of the way, Hank," Dr. Lewis assured him. "We'll take this journey together at a pace that feels comfortable for you. There's no rush, no deadline to meet. This is your life, your story, and you get to write the next chapter." Hank managed a small smile, his heart feeling just a little lighter than when he'd walked into the therapist's office. "Thank you, Dr. Lewis. I think this is the beginning of something life-changing." "Indeed it is, Hank. Indeed it is," Dr. Lewis replied with a knowing smile. Hank was ready for a change. "So, you're gonna do it?" Hank's sister, Emily, asked, her eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and awe. They sat in a cozy cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air around them. "I think so," Hank replied, taking a cautious sip of his latte. "I mean, I'm terrified, but also excited. It's like I've been given a second chance at life, a chance to finally be true to myself." Emily reached across the table, squeezing his hand gently. "I think it's amazing, Hank. Really, I'm so proud of you. You've always been so reserved, so closed off. To see you embracing this side of yourself is just wonderful." Hank felt a warm glow spread across his cheeks at his sister's words. "Thanks, Em. It means a lot to have your support. I know this is, well, it's a lot to process. I can't even imagine what you're going through," Emily admitted, her brow furrowed in a mixture of confusion and empathy. "But I'm here for you, no matter what. If this is what will make you happy, then I'm all for it." "Thank you." Hank squeezed her hand back, his voice thick with gratitude. "It's been a long road, and I'm just now starting to understand myself. To realize that all those years of feeling stuck and out of place weren't just in my head. Well, I'm just glad you're doing this for yourself." Emily paused, her eyes glancing around the cafe before landing back on Hank. "So, what's the plan? How do you even begin? Transitioning, is it called?" Hank chuckled, the sound warm and comforting in the quiet cafe. "It's a process, that's for sure. I'll be working with a therapist, and there are hormone treatments, voice training. I might even consider surgery down the line. It's a lot to take in." Emily's eyes widened further, her curiosity getting the better of her. "Wow, this is like a whole new world for me. I had no idea there was so much involved. It sounds like such a journey." "It is," Hank nodded, his eyes sparkling with a mixture of nerves and anticipation. "But I'm determined to see it through. I've spent too many years hiding, and I'm done with that. I want to embrace this new life with open arms." "You go, Hank!" Emily exclaimed, pumping her fist in the air. "I can't wait to see where this takes you. And hey, if you need any help along the way, shopping for a new wardrobe, learning makeup tricks, you know I'm your girl." Hank laughed, feeling a surge of love for his sister. "Thanks, Em. I might just take you up on that offer. This whole being a woman thing is going to be a whole new ballgame for me." "You'll be amazing, I just know it." Emily beamed at him, her eyes shining with sisterly affection. "And who knows, maybe we can even be those crazy aunties everyone talks about. You know, the fun ones who take their nieces and nephews on wild adventures." Hank's eyes lit up at the idea. Now that's a role I could definitely get used to. I can't wait to spoil some nieces and nephews rotten. The siblings shared a laugh, the tension of the conversation melting away as they envisioned their future antics as fun-loving aunt and uncle. Back home. "Hey, Dad, "How's it going?" Hank's son Matthew called out as he stepped into the living room of Hank's home. "Good, good," Hank replied, marking his place in the book he was reading with a finger before closing it and setting it aside. "Just enjoying a quiet evening at home. How are things with you?" "Oh, same old, same old." Matthew shrugged, tossing his keys onto the hall table as he walked in. "Work's keeping me busy, but I can't complain." He paused, his eyes flicking around the room before landing back on his father. "Everything okay here? You seemed a bit tense on the phone earlier." Hank sighed, running a hand through his silver hair. "I am a bit worked up, to be honest. I wanted to talk to you about something important." Matthew's brows furrowed in concern. "Yeah, of course. What's going on, Dad? You know you can tell me anything." Hank took a deep breath, steeling himself for this conversation. "I've made a decision, son. A big one. And I wanted you to hear it from me directly without any misunderstandings or rumors." Matthew's eyes widened, his curiosity piqued. "Okay, sure, Dad. What is it?" "I'm going to transition," Hank blurted out, the words rushing from his mouth before he could overthink them. "I'm transgender, Matthew. I've known it for a long time, but I'm only now gathering the courage to do something about it." Matthew's eyes widened further, his jaw dropping slightly as he processed his father's words. "Oh," he managed, his voice trailing off as he struggled to find the right response. I never expected." "I know, son," Hank said gently, seeing the whirlwind of emotions playing out on Matthew's face. "It's a lot to take in, but this is who I am, who I've always been. I'm just finally ready to live my truth." "Wow." Matthew ran a hand through his hair, shaking his head slightly as if to clear it. I had no idea, Dad. Not even a hint. You always seemed so, well, typical Dad, Hank chuckled softly, a bittersweet sound. I know. That's the whole point, isn't it? I've played the part of the typical dad for so long that even my own son had no idea. But, Matthew paused, his brow creased in confusion. "Does this mean you weren't happy all those years? Pretending to be someone you're not?" "It's complicated, Matthew," Hank replied, his voice gentle but firm. "I wasn't unhappy because of my family or my life with you and your mom. It's just, I was denying a part of myself, a very fundamental part. And that took a toll on me in ways you might not understand." "Okay." Matthew nodded slowly, his eyes reflecting the struggle to comprehend. "So what does this mean, going forward? Are you going to change your name? Wear dresses? One step at a time, son." Hank smiled, his eyes softening at the barrage of questions. "It's a process, a journey. But yes, I plan to change my name, my pronouns, the whole shebang. As for dresses, well, one day, maybe. Baby steps." "This is a lot to take in, Dad," Matthew sighed, running a hand over his face. Mom's gonna flip. She's always been so traditional. Your mother and I will have our own conversation," Hank said, his expression turning more serious. "I know this will be challenging for her, but I'm hoping that with time she'll come to understand and accept me for who I am." "And the rest of the family?" Matthew asked, concern etching his features. "They're not exactly the most progressive bunch." "One step at a time," Hank repeated, his voice steady. "I know there will be challenges, but I'm prepared for them. I've spent 60 years living a lie, and I refuse to do that any longer. I have to be true to myself, even if it means facing backlash from those who don't understand." Matthew nodded, his expression softening as he took in his father's determined stance. "I admire your courage, Dad. Really, I do. And I'll do my best to support you. It might take me a while to adjust, but I want you to know that I love you no matter what." "Thank you, son," Hank said, his voice thick with emotion. "That means more to me than you'll ever know. This won't be easy, but having your support gives me strength." A couple of days went by. "So, how are things going on the home front?" Dr. Lewis asked, her eyes curious yet gentle as she regarded Hank during their therapy session. "It's a mixed bag." Hank sighed, settling back in his chair with a slight frown.
My son, Matthew, he's been amazing. Supportive, curious, willing to learn. I couldn't ask for a better reaction from him. That's wonderful to hear, Hank. Dr. Lewis offered a warm smile. It sounds like you've raised a very open-minded and compassionate young man. Indeed. Hank nodded, a hint of pride creeping into his voice. I only wish his mother shared his attitude. Ah. Dr. Lewis's eyebrows arched slightly, inviting Hank to elaborate. My ex-wife, Linda. Hank sighed again, shaking his head. Let's just say she wasn't exactly receptive to the news. There were tears, accusations, even attempts to blame me for our divorce, which happened years ago. That must have been difficult to hear, Dr. Lewis said gently, her eyes empathetic. It was, Hank admitted, his gaze dropping to his hands folded in his lap. But I expected as much. Linda always prided herself on maintaining a certain image, a certain normalcy. Something like this, well, it disrupts that image. How did you respond to her accusations? Dr. Lewis asked, her tone encouraging. I reminded her that our divorce had nothing to do with my gender identity, Hank said, his voice steady. And that this isn't something I'm doing for attention or to upset anyone. It's about my truth, my need to live authentically. And what about your own parents and the rest of your family? Doctor, Lewis prompted, her eyes intent on Hank's. My parents have passed, thankfully, Hank said, a small grimace crossing his face. I can't deny that I feel some relief that they're not here to witness this. They were very traditional, narrow-minded folks. Their reaction would have broken my heart all over again. I understand. Dr. Lewis nodded, her expression sympathetic. Sometimes it's a relief to know that certain people won't be there to judge or criticize. It's one less hurdle to face. Exactly. Hank breathed a sigh of relief, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders as he admitted this truth. As for the rest of my family, it's a mixed bag. My sister Emily, she's been incredible. Supportive, excited for me even. But there are other relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins, who I know won't be as accepting. I'm steeling myself for their reactions. You don't have to face those reactions alone, Hank, Dr. Lewis reminded him gently. You have your support system, your son, your sister, and even me. We're here to help you navigate those conversations and relationships. That means a lot, Doctor. Hank offered a small smile. It truly does. Sometimes it feels like I'm walking a tightrope, balancing between excitement for my future and dread for those difficult conversations. It's a delicate balance, for sure. Dr. Lewis agreed, her voice soothing. But remember, you're doing this for yourself, for your own happiness and fulfillment. And while you can't control others' reactions, you can control how you respond to them, with courage, grace, and authenticity. I'll keep that in mind, Doctor, Hank replied, his voice steady, a newfound determination shining in his eyes. I refuse to let others' potential judgments hold me back. This is my life, and I plan to seize it with both hands. That's the spirit! Dr. Lewis beamed at him, her eyes shining with encouragement. And remember, you don't have to face those conversations right away. Take your time, build up your support system, and approach each relationship with care. Change takes time, and so does acceptance. One step at a time. Hank nodded, his gaze steady and resolute. I can do this. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm truly in control of my destiny. You absolutely can, and you absolutely are, Dr. Lewis affirmed, her smile warm and supportive. Now let's continue to map out a plan to help you navigate these conversations and relationships. With the right tools and mindset, I know you'll succeed.
Back home, Hank sat down to relax, and his phone buzzed.
Hey, Em, what's up?
Hank asked, answering his sister's FaceTime call. He was pleasantly surprised to see her face pop up on his screen, and he waved cheerfully. Hey, Hank! Emily's face lit up with a matching enthusiasm. I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. It's been a couple of weeks since we last talked, and I know you've had some big conversations coming up. She bit her lip, her eyes shining with sisterly concern. Yeah, it's been a whirlwind. Hank settled back in his armchair, his gaze softening as he regarded his sister. I wanted to fill you in, but I also wanted to give myself some time to process everything. It's been a lot. Of course, take your time. Emily nodded understandingly, her brunette curls bouncing as she gestured with her free hand. I'm just glad you're reaching out now. How did it go with Linda and the rest of the family? It's been a real mixed bag. Hank sighed, his eyes clouding over for a moment. Linda, well, it wasn't pretty. She accused me of lying to her all those years, of betraying the life we built together. She even brought up our divorce, saying this was the final nail in the coffin or something like that. Oh, Hank. Emily's eyes widened, her brows furrowing in dismay. I'm so sorry. That must have hurt like hell. Do you want to talk about it? Not really. Hank shook his head, a slight grimace crossing his face. I knew it wouldn't be easy with her, and I was right. It's just hard to hear those words from someone you once loved, you know? To see the judgment and disapproval in her eyes. I can only imagine. Emily's voice softened, her eyes reflecting the pain she felt for her brother. But you know what? She's entitled to her reaction, but you're entitled to live your truth. You're doing what's best for you, and that's what matters. Thanks, Em. Hank offered a small smile, gratitude warming his heart. That means a lot coming from you. Family reactions are tough, but hearing that you've got my back makes it a little easier. Always. Emily nodded fervently. So, what about the rest of the family? Have you told anyone else? A few cousins and aunts. Hank sighed, his eyes glancing downward for a moment before meeting his sister's gaze again. The responses have been varied, to say the least. Some have been supportive, or at least trying to understand. But others... He shook his head, his expression turning pained. What? Emily leaned forward, her eyes fixed on her brother's, worry creasing her brow. What did they say? You know I've got your back, Hank. Nothing they can say or do will change the fact that you're my big brother and I love you. I know, Em. Hank's voice thickened with emotion. It's just, some of the reactions have been ugly, filled with anger and vitriol. I've been called selfish, disgusting, even had one cousin tell me I'm going to hell. He shook his head, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. What? Emily's eyes widened in outrage, her brows knitting together. That's horrible, Hank. I'm so sorry. Those people are supposed to be family, and they're acting like bigoted monsters. I know. Hank waved a hand as if trying to dismiss the hurt. I expected some backlash, but hearing those words from family, it stings, you know? Of course it does, Emily huffed, her cheeks flushing with anger. But you know what? They don't deserve the title of family. True family loves unconditionally and accepts you for who you are. End of story. You're right. Hank nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips at his sister's fierceness. It's just hard to shake off those judgments, especially when they come from people who are supposed to love you. Hey, you've got me, and I love you unconditionally, Emily said, her voice steady and firm. And I know Matthew does too. We're your family, Hank, and we're not going anywhere. Thanks, Em. Hank smiled, his eyes shining with gratitude. I don't know what I'd do without you two. You're making this journey a whole lot brighter. Anytime, big brother. Emily beamed at him, her eyes sparkling with sisterly affection. Now, on a lighter note, did you want to come over for dinner tomorrow? I'm making lasagna, and I'll make sure to save you a generous slice. Ooh, lasagna, my kryptonite. Hank laughed, the sadness of the previous topic evaporating under his sister's warmth. Twist my arm, why don't you? I'll bring some garlic bread and a nice bottle of wine. Deal, Emily grinned, her eyes alight with mischief. And hey, if you want, we can even do a mini makeover. I got some new eyeshadows and lipsticks I'd love to try out, and you could be my guinea pig. Hank laughed, a warm and genuine sound. Maybe another time, Em. Let's take this one step at a time, shall we? But dinner sounds fantastic, and I can't wait to spend some quality time with my favorite sister. Favorite and only, Emily teased, winking at him. See you tomorrow, Hank, and remember, I'm always here for you no matter what. Love you, Em. Hank smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Talk to you tomorrow. Love you too. Emily blew him a kiss before ending the call. The next day, "Hey, Dad, what's up?" Matthew greeted his father as he walked into the living room of Hank's house. He set down a bag of groceries on the kitchen counter, his eyes warm and curious as he turned to face his father. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, everything's fine," Hank replied, setting down his book and folding his reading glasses, slipping them into the breast pocket of his shirt. "Just wanted to touch base with you, see how you're doing." "Oh." Matthew's brow creased slightly, his eyes searching his father's. "Is everything okay? You seemed a bit somber on the phone." "I'm fine, son," Hank assured him, his voice calm and steady. "It's just, I wanted to give you an update on how things are going, especially after I told your mother." "Ah." Matthew nodded, his gaze dropping to the floor for a moment before meeting his father's eyes again. "How did it go? You didn't mention much on the phone." "It was not great." Hank sighed, his eyes clouding over with the memory of that difficult conversation. "She accused me of lying to her, of betraying our marriage. She couldn't understand why I didn't tell her sooner." "Oof," Matthew winced, his eyes reflecting his father's pain. "That's rough, Dad. I'm sorry. I know you were nervous about telling her." "It's okay, son." Hank gave a small shrug, his shoulders sagging slightly under the weight of the memory. "I expected as much. Your mother always valued appearances and what others might think. This goes against all that." "But it's who you are, Dad," Matthew said firmly, his eyes holding a steady gaze. "And it's brave of you to finally live your truth. If she can't see that, then it's her loss." "Thanks, Matt." Hank's eyes softened, a wave of gratitude washing over him. "Your support means the world to me. It really does. I know this can't be easy for you either." "It's an adjustment for sure." Matthew nodded, his expression turning pensive. "But you know what? Seeing you take this step, seeing the joy it's bringing you, it makes it all worth it. I just want you to be happy, Dad." "And I am, son." Hank smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "I truly am. Even with the challenges and the judgments, I've never felt more alive, more like myself. That's worth more than I can say." "I'm glad, Dad." Matthew returned the smile, his eyes shining with genuine happiness for his father. "Really, I am. And hey, if you ever need to vent or talk, you know I'm here, right?" "I know, Matt." Hank's voice thickened with emotion. "Having you by my side makes this whole journey easier. I'm grateful every day that you're my son." Matthew's smile widened, his eyes sparkling. "Likewise, Dad. Now, on a lighter note, are you hungry? I picked up some steaks from the butcher. Thought we could fire up the grill and enjoy the nice weather." "Sounds perfect, son." Hank beamed at him, his heart full to bursting. "Let's do it, and hey, I'll even teach you a thing or two about grilling the perfect steak. It's an art, you know." "Oh boy, the masterclass begins!" Matthew laughed, clapping his hands together in mock excitement. "Lead the way, Dad. I'll grab the seasoning and the salad fixings." Laughter filled the house as father and son made their way to the backyard, a warm breeze ushering in a night of camaraderie, delicious food, and unbreakable familial bonds. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out Patreon for a lot more content and early access to YouTube videos.